Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere a little grim. But don't worry, you're already doomed. Imagine, the sky is gray, the air smells like wet stone and sheep, and every step you take squelches with a faintly biblical dampness. You're not in a horror story, you're just in 13th century Europe. Specifically, you're trudging through a monastery courtyard somewhere in the English countryside, desperately trying not to sneeze from the mold blooming under your cloak. The stone walls loom above you, ancient and humorless. A bell rings. You flinch. It's dinner time. Or at least what counts as dinner in a medieval monastery. You don't know it yet, but your stomach will remember this meal for all the wrong reasons. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your city and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The wooden gate creaks shut behind you with a sense of finality you weren't expecting. You are, quite literally, locked in. You've been given a worn woolen robe, still damp from its previous owner, and a vague instruction to follow the bell. The gravel crunches beneath your sandals. Yes, sandals, because apparently damp. Toes are a spiritual discipline. You pass under a cloister archway where rainwater drips in steady rhythm onto your shoulder. Monastic life isn't about comfort. It's about order, ritual, and an almost masochistic tolerance for mealtime boredom. The hallway you enter is narrow and windowless, lit only by a few tallow candles huddled near wall sconces. The wax has dripped down the stone in a way that feels accusatory. You smell something cooking, but don't get excited. It's not meat, it's not even vegetables. It's something you'll come to know intimately: pottage. Imagine every bland thing you've ever eaten, now simmered with the faint suggestion of onion and penitence. A figure shuffles past, an old monk wrapped tight in brown wool, muttering something to himself that may or may not be Latin. You nod, out of habit. He doesn't respond. This is your first lesson. Monasteries are not chatty places. Dinner is not for socializing. Dinner is for silent chewing and spiritual reflection, and maybe a side of quiet existential dread. You enter the refectory, a long, echoey dining hall with high ceilings and an almost holy disregard for acoustics. Benches line either side of long wooden tables, sanded down by centuries of elbows and silent suffering. The air is cool despite the effort someone has made to light a small hearth at the far end. Smoke doesn't so much rise as loiter. It curls around the ceiling like a ghost who's given up on haunting and just wants to watch people chew slowly. You're ushered to your seat by a younger monk who seems far too cheerful for the environment. Maybe he's new, maybe he still has dreams. Either way, he gestures vaguely and moves on. You sit. The bench is hard. It will not become softer. Your robe sticks to the backs of your thighs. You shift slightly. The movement echoes in the silence. Congratulations, you're the loud one now. Before you can adjust to your new posture of discomfort, a bell sounds again. Everyone bows their heads. A Latin prayer begins, recited in the tone of someone who said it 400 times and still can't remember where to breathe. You bow your head too, unsure if this is devotion or just social camouflage. Then, finally, the moment of truth. The meal begins, except it doesn't. Not for you. You forgot that you're not allowed to serve yourself. You sit and wait. Your stomach groans audibly. Somewhere near the front of the hall, a ladle hits the bottom of a cauldron. You count the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 14, 15. Surely they're coming, right? Eventually, a bowl is placed in front of you. It's wooden, slightly cracked, and steaming faintly. You look down. Pottage. You already hate the word. It's a kind of thick soup made from grains, water, and whatever the kitchen monk found still clinging to life in the pantry. If you're lucky, you'll get a chickpea. If you're really lucky, you won't notice the beetle. Next to the bowl is a chunk of bread, so dense it could be used as currency. It's barley-based, with the nutritional value of a small stone. You break off a piece and immediately regret the force it requires. Your jaw is going to get stronger by the end of this meal. Or broken. Across the table, a monk begins reading from a raised pulpit. He's loud, he's nasal, and he is absolutely determined to read every single word of Deuteronomy at a pace that makes molasses seem impatient. You're expected to eat in silence while absorbing spiritual wisdom, but mostly you absorb your own hunger. The bread sticks to the roof of your mouth. The pottage is lukewarm. The bench creaks beneath you in a way that feels like judgment. You glance around. Everyone else seems fine, stoic, possibly dead inside. A few chew rhythmically, eyes forward, expressions blank. No one talks, no one gestures. One guy sneezes and looks immediately ashamed, and yet strangely, there's a rhythm to it, a kind of quiet unity. You're all equally uncomfortable, equally cold, equally chewing something that may or may not have once been cabbage. It's not exactly community, but it's something close, like group therapy for people who think comfort is a moral failing. Esti, you lift the wooden spoon again, it occurs to you. There is no salt. There is never salt. It's not that the monks can't afford it, it's that they've chosen to forgo seasoning as part of their ascetic discipline. Historians still argue whether this was about humility or just a very aggressive dislike of pleasure. Either way, you taste nothing, and it tastes like spiritual growth. Your mind wanders. You think of your phone. Then remember your phone doesn't exist yet, but if it did, it would definitely be dead and wet, and there'd be no Wi-Fi. Meanwhile, your stomach is full of hope and not much else. You look down. The pottage is gone. The bread is gone. You are not full. A faint burp rises in your throat. You swallow it with the urgency of someone avoiding damnation. Because yes, monks are judged on table manners. The rule of Saint Benedict doesn't mess around. You eat with 3 fingers. You don't speak. You don't slurp. You definitely don't burp. There is a story of a monk once exiled to the orchard for scratching his nose during grace. You believe it? The bell rings again. Everyone stands. You do too, wobbly and confused. A short prayer, a small bow, then a silent shuffle out of the room, like a very pious fire drill. You glance back once more at the empty bowl, the hard bench, the stone walls. This was your introduction. This was dinner. And it only gets stranger from here. You wake up in a daze, still wearing the same robe that clung to your thighs during dinner. It's somehow colder now. The scent of pottage lingers in the fibers like a curse. Your stomach isn't exactly growling, it's sulking. You'd hoped maybe a second course would magically appear during the night. It didn't. Outside your narrow cell, a bell rings again. Not the joyous chime of a morning cafe, but the kind of bell that says, you're not in control anymore. You shuffle out into the corridor, passing a few bowed heads. No one says, "Good morning." That would be talking, and talking is for after death, or at least after dinner. Your mind drifts back to last night's meal, not because it was good, but because it's still stuck in your molars. You imagine a piece of barley cemented in the back of your mouth. You try to work it out with your tongue and discover a splinter from the spoon. Perfect. You're told it's time to prepare for the day, and more specifically, for the rule of silence. Yes, if you thought dinner was quiet, you're in for a full soundless symphony now. The rule of silence governs not just meals, but most of monastic life, at least in theory. In practice, it's a strange dance of glances, nods, and dramatic sighs. And now, as a guest, you're expected to participate. You walk with the others into the cloister again. Morning mist clings to the arches. A bird chirps, then immediately regrets it. No one reacts. You think of replying to the bird just to feel something. You don't? You're handed a small card, yes, a literal card, that has drawings of a spoon, a bowl, and a loaf of bread. This is your communication method for the day. If you need something, you point. If you want something else. Too bad. At breakfast, which is more of a formality than a meal, you receive a cup of thin ale and half a heel of yesterday's bread. You make eye contact with a monk across the table. His expression suggests this is as good as it gets. You smile weakly. He doesn't return it. Emotion, it seems, is also restricted. Afterward, a younger monk, maybe 17, maybe 60, motions for you to follow him. His gesture is somewhere between "come with me" and "prepare to be disappointed." You obey. Down a narrow hallway you go, past stone carvings that seem to scowl at you with every step. He stops at a door, he opens it, you step inside. It's the scriptorium, not where they copy books, where they copy silence. This is the room you'll wait in before your next assigned activity, which happens to be dinner. Again, because apparently time is circular when you're hungry. But before that sacred event, you're given a parchment scroll with a list of monastic behavioral codes. The rules are written in a Latin so stiff, it could double as dried fish. Luckily, someone's made notes in the margin. Helpful little translations like, "Do not chew with mouth open," and "No farting during Vespers." That last one has a little drawing of a monk with steam lines, so you're confident. It's a serious offense. You try not to laugh, you fail a little. The monk beside you glances over. You look away. Your scroll flutters. The silence remains unbroken. Somehow this makes the embarrassment worse. Lunch is skipped today because it's a fast day. Or it's Wednesday, or both. You're not sure. You're not allowed to ask. The only indicator that something is happening is the long, slow tolling of the bell again. It's like Pavlov's dinner gong, except without the dinner. Afternoon fades into evening with the quiet majesty of a sun that knows it's not welcome. Shadows stretch across the refectory again as you enter for your second meal. You're more prepared now. You know the routine. You do not speak. You do not look directly at anyone. You bow slightly. You wait. Tonight's dinner is identical to last night's, with one thrilling difference. The bread is even harder. A bowl is placed before you with the reverence of a sacred offering. Pottage again, the scent is nostalgic like the memory of a sad meal filtered through a wet sock. You stir it. This time there's a turnip chunk. You weep internally, and then it begins. The scripture reading. Same monk, same tone, possibly the same chapter. You wonder if he's actually reading or just freestyling from memory. His voice bounces off the walls with the energy of someone who hasn't smiled since childhood. You try to eat slowly, but that only extends the suffering. The bread cracks when you bite it. You fear for your dental future, which, to be fair, in this era is already doomed. You soak the bread in the pottage. It dissolves like wet chalk. Success? Midway through, the monk beside you sneezes, loudly, a scandal. All eyes shift. You freeze. He bows his head in shame. Somewhere, someone quietly scribbles on a tablet, probably a record of sneeze-based sins. Historians still argue whether monastic silence was strictly enforced or more symbolic, whether it was a matter of theology or just a way to keep the introverts in charge. What's clear is that the practice had an effect. You feel less like a guest and more like a ghost, seen but not heard, not even by yourself. It occurs to you that silence doesn't mean peace. It just means you have to live with your thoughts, louder than usual, and your thoughts are mostly food-related. You imagine a modern dinner, a phone in one hand, a fork in the other, music playing, someone asking for more gravy. Then you blink. The monk has just read a passage about locusts. You have no context. It feels symbolic. The meal ends again with prayer, a slow rise, and a careful retreat. You're starting to crave the routine as much as the food. There's something hypnotic about discomfort when it's applied in equal doses, like a sauna of austerity. You walk the same corridor back to your cell, same dripping ceiling, same puddle. At the left corner, you step in it again, on purpose this time. It's tradition now. You close your eyes in the dark. The silence seeps into your bones. The hunger stays, and that wooden spoon splinter in your gum? Yeah, still there. You wake. To a bell, not a gentle chime, not the polite nudge of a snooze button. This bell tolls like it's apologizing for nothing. It rings from the tower above with all the subtlety of a conscience you didn't know you had. Your eyes creak open, it's still. Dark, or maybe it's dawn. The candle stub left on your windowsill has melted into an accusatory puddle. You grope for something comforting and find only your own elbow. This is the monastic schedule, and it is not designed with your RM cycle in mind. You've slept, but not deeply. Your dreams were odd, a recurring one about a sandwich that kept floating away. You are now beginning to suspect that was not a dream, but a primal memory of dinner. A monk passes your doorway with a wooden clapper, the medieval equivalent of a wake-up alarm. The sound is hollow, like a knock on your spine. There's no breakfast. Waiting. Again. There might be something small later, after prayers, but nothing you'd classify as food. The word breakfast itself hasn't settled into its modern meaning yet. What you'll get, if anything, is a chunk of bread or a sip of ale that tastes like it gave up during fermentation, and yet somehow you are already late. You shuffle into the cold corridor with the grace of a man whose knees have declared independence. Down in the cloister, the monks gather in twos and threes, wordless, robed, and utterly indifferent to your very visible suffering. Their faces are calm, their hands folded, their sandals flapping gently against the flagstones like wet fish. No one meets your eyes. That's not because they dislike you. They've just sworn a lifelong oath to ignore everything warm and fuzzy about human nature. You make your way to the chapel for morning prayers. The incense hits you like a soft, dusty wall. Frankincense, probably. It's expensive stuff imported from somewhere far holier than your stomach. The monks begin to chant. It's slow, haunting, and slightly off-key. You feel something stir inside you. Hunger? Guilt? Or maybe it's just the barley from last night staging a comeback. The service ends and you're directed toward the workyard. Today, you've been assigned to the herb garden. This sounds quaint until you realize it's a muddy field with a few miserable stalks clinging to life. Your job is to weed it, by hand, with a spoon. Not really, but it might as well be. Your fingers freeze, your knees ache. You brush dirt from a worm and wonder briefly if it's edible. You decide against it, for now. As you dig, you hear another bell. This one's different. Hopeful, almost. You straighten, ears pricked. Could it be? Yes, early dinner. Or technically, main meal, since this will be your one true meal of the day. It's still before sunset because monks eat while the sun is up, partly out of tradition, and partly because medieval lighting is about as useful as a wet sock. You wipe your hands on your robe, which by now smells like herbal tea and body odor. You shuffle to the refectory, stomach leading the way. It's almost comforting now, the ritual, the bow at the door, the silent procession to the bench, the way your knees automatically anticipate the cold seat. You're becoming one of them, slowly. Unfortunately, the meal is different. Not better, just different. It's still pottage, but today it's made with beans. This, apparently, is cause for celebration. A few monks glance at their bowls with what might be joy or confusion. It's hard to tell when the bar for excitement is legume-based viscosity. You dip your spoon in with reverence. The consistency is thicker today. That's new. It clings to the bowl's side with the tenacity of regret. You taste it. Earthy, nutty, a hint of something green and undercooked. You chew, slowly, carefully. A monk nearby shifts slightly. His robe rustles like a paper bag. Across the room, the reader climbs into place and begins reciting. Today, it's from Ecclesiastes. To everything there is a season. You nod involuntarily. Apparently, this is the season of flatulence and fiber. Midway through, you feel whatchy chip. Your body reacting, not violently, just noticeably. The beans are working. Monastic life doesn't spare the bowels. You steel yourself. The silence rule has never felt more ominous. You glance at the wall. The murals here depict saints and martyrs, men who withstood fire, lions, and public ridicule. You too are suffering in your own digestive way. You chew, you pray, you chew again. Historically, the monastic day revolved around strict scheduling. The canonical hours divided time into sacred obligations: matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, nun, vespers, and compline. You're not expected to keep them all, but the monks do. They revolve around prayer, work, and silent meals. Historians still argue whether this was truly spiritual devotion or just a very structured way to suppress human chaos. Either way, your stomach doesn't care. It just wants rice. Rice doesn't exist here. You finish your meal. Another bowl scraped clean, another splinter avoided, barely. The bread today is slightly softer. Either you've gotten stronger or the cook showed mercy. You suspect the former. As you rise, you notice a basin near the doorway. A monk dips his fingers into it, makes the sign of the cross, and dries his hands on his robe. You copy him. The water is cold. Your fingers tingle. You feel vaguely holy, also very damp. You leave the refectory in the now familiar procession. The sun is lower, the wind stronger, and your resolve somehow firmer. You didn't just survive the meal. You participated in it. You obeyed the rhythm. You didn't burp. Your cell is quiet when you return. There's a small beeswax candle lit for compline prayers and a faint scent of lavender someone must have smuggled in. You lie on your straw mattress. The silence now feels less like a punishment and more like a blanket, an itchy one. But still, you think back to earlier today, digging in the dirt, fumbling your way through the rule of silence, wondering if eating lentils counts as an act of devotion. It does here. Everything does, even bowel control. You drift toward sleep, thinking of beans. Not fondly, but with acceptance. The fourth day begins with something new, pain in your lower back. It's the kind of pain that suggests you've been repeatedly run over by a slow ox cart, which, in this place, might be a compliment to the bedding. You shift on the straw mattress and hear it crunch, not in a cozy breakfast cereal way. You think it might actually contain part of last season's harvest, possibly still alive. The bell tolls again, of course. It always does. No one talks. You dress in your robe, now equal parts wool and ambient monastery scent, half incense, half compost pile. Outside your door, the morning corridor feels like someone left the freezer open in a church. The stones sweat, your toes curl, you shuffle on. The other monks are already in formation, heading toward the chapel. It's all in the steps now. Everyone moves in sync like a slow, grim ballet. You join the flow. Nobody smiles, nobody stumbles. If you do either, you're probably a guest. Or worse, a novice. This morning's prayers are particularly long. The chanting drones on, slow and slightly nasal, like Gregorian monks trying to lull God back to sleep. You count the flickers of candlelight. You try to follow the Latin. You fail spectacularly. You think the verse is about temptation, or possibly sheep. You begin to nod off. Your head jerks. Someone clears their throat pointedly. You are now fully awake and fully ashamed. After prayers, you expect breakfast. You are mistaken. Again. Today is a feast day, paradoxically, which means fasting. Don't ask. You can't anyway. Silence. Remember? And the logic doesn't track. Historians still argue whether monastic feast days were meant to increase spiritual focus or simply keep the cooks on their toes by denying them patterns. Eventually, you're herded gently, but with unmistakable firmness, into the refectory again. This isn't dinner. It's your assigned seat inspection. You didn't know monks did that, but here you are. standing before a long bench while a senior brother taps the surface with 2 fingers and mutters something like, "Sufficiently clean." You nod. He doesn't. You're not allowed to sit yet. First, the reading monk climbs into his elevated pulpit and begins reciting again, today, from the writings of Saint Jerome, who once called laughter a sin. That sets the tone. Finally, you're given permission to sit. The bench still remembers your hips from yesterday. Your knees sigh. A wooden bowl is placed in front of you. It contains a kind of porridge. You're not excited, but you are less afraid than you used to be. That's progress. You taste it. It's warm, slightly better than pottage, possibly because it's made with oats. There's a faint hint of dried apple, or maybe you imagined it. Your standards have fallen to the floor and are now tunneling underground. As you chew, your eyes drift to the walls. They're decorated with paintings, though decorated might be generous. Most are stern saints holding books, spears, or expressions that suggest they never once enjoyed a meal. One has a particularly impressive halo that resembles a frying pan. You decide he's your patron saint now, Saint Burnt Toast. Today's meal includes a small portion of cheese. This is both exciting and alarming. Medieval cheese is not modern cheese. It's sour, crumbly, and alive in ways that science frowns upon. Still, it's protein. You eat it cautiously, savoring the vague tang. Across from you, a monk chews with mechanical precision. You try to match his pace. You fail again. He glances up. Your eyes meet. You panic and look down at your cheese. It looks back. For drink, as usual, there's ale. You've learned to sip it slowly. Too much, and your stomach stages a protest. Too little, and the bread remains a stone in your gut. The ale today is slightly warmer than usual and slightly cloudier. You assume that means it's fresh or dangerous. The silence is thick, but no longer as oppressive. You're starting to understand that silence here is its own kind of language. The scrape of a spoon, the shift of a robe, the carefully suppressed cough, all of it tells you more than words would. You're not alone. You're just very, very quiet. You begin to notice other things now. The rhythm of the meal, the way the servers move down the rows with practiced steps, the way each monk places their spoon in the exact same spot when they're done. You mimic them. You feel like you're passing some kind of silent test. And maybe you are. As the meal ends, another bell tolls. You rise with the group. This time, your bench groans less, or maybe you've finally gone numb. You file out into the cloister, blinking at the late afternoon light. It's cold again. Your breath puffs out like guilt. Your next task is dish duty. You didn't volunteer. No one does. It's just your turn. The kitchen is a separate building, built to keep heat and smells away from the cloister. The door creaks. Inside, it's warm, blessedly, dangerously warm. You stand near the hearth a moment too long. The kitchen brother swats your elbow with a wooden spoon and gestures to a pile of bowls. Washing dishes in a monastery means cold water, a rag that may be older than the monastery itself, and ash. Yes, ash. From the fire, as soap. You scrub the bowls until your fingers cramp. You think about modern kitchens with running hot water, rubber gloves, and scented detergent. You think about them a lot. Meanwhile, your spoon still has remnants of that cheese on it, possibly forever. After the dishes, you're allowed a few minutes of quiet reflection. You find a bench in the herb garden, now kissed by frost. You sit, you breathe. You wonder how many monks are actually happy. Then you wonder what happiness meant in a time where dinner was a spiritual event and flavor was borderline heretical. A robin lands nearby. You don't move. It stares at you. You stare back. For a second, you feel deeply connected to this tiny creature. Then it poops and flies away. Connection over. You return to your cell. Your knees pop with every step. Your stomach growls politely. Tomorrow, you hope, will bring something different. Maybe an extra turnip, maybe not. You lie down. The straw crackles. You close your eyes. Remember that oat porridge? You might see it again soon in your dreams or your nightmares. You wake again to the sound of the bell, your most reliable enemy. It doesn't just ring, it proclaims. It says, yes, you're still here. Yes, it's still cold. No, there will not be pancakes. You sit up, joints cracking like dry branches. Your robe has twisted around you in the night like a vengeful blanket snake. You tug it loose and immediately regret exposing your shoulder to the chill. Outside your cell, the air has taken on that particular kind of damp that seeps through stone, wool, and soul. The sun isn't up yet, but the monastery is already moving, already silent. You fall into step with the others, heading toward morning prayers, thinking not of God but of heat, or rather, the lack of it. After prayers, you're assigned a new task, sweeping the cloister walkways. You're given a broom made of twigs lashed together like someone's bitter joke about progress. You sweep slowly, thoughtfully, not because you're devout, but because you're hungry and there's nowhere else to be. Midway through the cloister circuit, you hear the sound again, the bell for the main meal. Dinner time, even though it's technically late afternoon. You've lost track of the days. You're starting to suspect that was intentional. You shuffle into the refectory now like a veteran. The same bench, the same table, the same reverent awkwardness. But something's different today. At the far end of the room, a monk climbs into the lectern, holding not scripture, but a large leather-bound volume. Not the Bible, not a saint's life. It's a menu. Sort of. Today, the reader is delivering an instructional homily on proper monastic behavior during meals. You suppress a groan. Instead of zoning out, you're now being told, out loud, how to eat. You clutch your spoon tighter. Your rebellious inner child is awake. The rules are, to put it gently, precise. You must lift food with your spoon, not slurp from the bowl. You must eat with 3 fingers, not the whole hand. Elbows must not touch the table. Chewing must be quiet, slow, and invisible. Napkins are non-existent. Your sleeve is implied. You may not lick your fingers or your bowl or anything else. You may not burp. You may not sigh. You may not enjoy. Apparently, Saint Benedict believed that how one eats reveals the soul's discipline. Historians still argue whether this was practical advice or a coded attack on gluttonous monks. Either way, it turns dinner into performance art. Finally, the food arrives. Pottage again, but today it's made with barley and bits of something red? You cautiously prod the bowl. Beet, maybe, or dried plum, or something that once aspired to be both and failed. A single cube of root vegetable stares up at you like it regrets being born. Beside the bowl sits your bread. You've stopped, thinking of it as food. It's more like a blunt instrument you're slowly sanding down with your teeth. Today's chunk is darker, denser, and crusted with something gritty, maybe salt, maybe gravel. The ale, too, has changed. It's sourer, possibly older. It smells like wet leaves and pennants, but it's still liquid. So you drink. Halfway through your bowl, you reach a moment of unanticipated panic. A hiccup. Loud. You clamp your hand over your mouth. The reader continues without pause, but 3 monks glance up. The one to your left actually raises an eyebrow. You may now be on a list. You stare at your bowl and vow never to inhale barley again. As the meal drags on, your mind drifts. You recall modern restaurants, background music, laminated menus, neon signs promising spice and customization. You miss the idea of choice. Here, your only choice is how deeply you want to pretend to like beets. Across the hall, one of the older monks shifts in his seat and scratches his beard. The sound echoes slightly. It's the loudest thing that's happened all meal. You seize this opportunity to adjust your tunic, which has once again become aggressively moist in the armpits. Comfort, as always, is theoretical. The reading continues. This time, it's about the sin of distraction during meals. Let no brother allow his eyes to wander, the monk reads. You lock eyes with your bowl. You stare as if your soul depends on it. Maybe it does. Eventually, the meal concludes. thou. Bell tolls. Everyone rises. You do too. The bowl is empty. The bread is not. You hide the uneaten chunk inside your robe, unsure if that's a sin or a survival instinct. You suspect both. You exit into the courtyard. The wind bites harder today. The stone path glistens from a recent rain. You step around puddles with a practiced shuffle. Your sandals squish. Your toes sigh. You pass the same pigeon that's been haunting the cloister roof for 3 days. He looks at you. You look back. You both understand suffering. You head to your next duty, copying texts in the scriptorium. You're handed a quill, a page of vellum, and a block of wood to lean on. Your task, transcribe a prayer without blotting the ink. You haven't written with a quill before. You will now understand why medieval scribes died young, or at least bitter. You hunch over the desk. The ink smells like iron and old blood. You scratch the first letter onto the page. It immediately smudges. A novice coughs behind you. You suppress the urge to throw your quill. Hours pass, or minutes. Time here doesn't behave normally. You finish your line. It reads something like, "Oh Lord, make me pure." You accidentally dip your sleeve in the ink. Your prayer now ends with a smear. You feel deeply, authentically medieval. You're allowed to leave before Vespers. Outside, dusk has fallen like a heavy robe. The sky is pale, bruised with cloud. You return to your cell. You sit on the bed. You pull out the bread chunk from your robe and stare at it. You break off a piece and chew it slowly. It tastes like resignation, and somehow, impossibly, it comforts you. You awaken before the bell today, not out of spiritual enlightenment, but because your stomach growled so violently it startled you awake. You lie there for a moment in the dark, listening to the slow creak of wind against the walls, the occasional drip of water in the corridor, and your own digestive system asking you, politely but firmly, if you have any idea what you're doing. Your breath comes out in pale little clouds. The straw beneath you crunches as you shift. You pull the robe tighter. The fabric smells faintly of mildew and old lentils, which at this point is more familiar than off-putting. You sit up, blinking at the dim candle stub flickering on your windowsill. You've started calling it Gerald. Gerald is your only source of warmth. He's doing his best. The bell tolls. You don't flinch anymore. You rise, stretch, and shuffle into the hallway, where a procession of brown-robed figures is already forming. It's astonishing how silently dozens of sandals can move across cold stone. You join the line like a weary ghost, sliding past the same cracked statue of St. Cuthbert and the same puddle that you're starting to suspect is actually a permanent feature. The morning prayers are longer today. The monks chant in that same rhythmic nasal cadence, reverent and oddly hypnotic. You catch yourself mouthing along. You don't know the Latin, but your lips mimic the shape of the syllables. You feel less like an intruder now, more like furniture. When prayers end, you're pulled aside. A monk gestures for you to follow him, leading you not to the workyard or the herb garden, but to the kitchens. Your heart lifts slightly. Could this be the day you see what's really behind those wooden doors? You are not disappointed. The kitchen is warm, smoky, and smells like boiled turnips. Large pots bubble over fire pits, tended by silent brothers who move with the quiet efficiency of people who have absolutely no interest in your opinion. You're handed a ladle and a task stirring. The pot you're assigned is enormous, almost cauldron-sized, and contains what appears to be lentils, barley, chopped onions, and some sort of leaf that's doing its best. You stir clockwise, slowly. The spoon is a carved plank. Your arm aches within minutes. A monk nods approvingly. Eventually, bowls are filled. You are handed one and motioned to follow. It's dinner time again, though your concept of time has become deeply warped. Days blur, meals blur. The only thing that remains vividly unique is the precise flavor of each version of pottage. You enter the refectory already holding your bowl, which makes you feel like you've leveled up somehow. The bench greets your backside with the same unkindness. The monk reader is already climbing into place. Today, the reading is from one of the Desert Fathers, a monk who lived in a literal cave and reportedly ate a single date per day. You try to imagine being that committed to fasting. You fail. You look down at your bowl and feel extravagant. You raise the spoon to your lips. The pottage is hot, surprisingly hot. For a brief second, you feel hopeful, but then it hits you, the same core trio, blandness, graininess, and the faint suspicion that this is penance in edible form. The leaf offers no redemption. It's just green. The reader drones on. You chew slowly, mindful of the rule of silence. No talking, no sighing, no clinking your spoon against the bowl too loudly. A monk 3 seats away drops a crust of bread, and 4 heads swivel in perfect synchronicity. You feel a chill that has nothing to do with the draft. Bread today is bread. It's made from coarse ground barley flour, baked into a shape that could double as architectural support. You try to bite it, you fail. You soak it in the pottage until it becomes more pliable. It still tastes like sorrow, but now it's a damp sorrow. You sip your ale. It's room temperature, slightly fizzy, and mildly sour. You've been told it's brewed in-house, possibly under duress. Still, it's wet, and that's more than you can say for the bread. As you chew, your mind wanders. What would a modern person make of this? No seasoning, no sugar, no side dishes, no choices, just food as function. You imagine trying to Yelp review this place? Ambiance, 10/10. Flavor, is that a sin? Meanwhile, your phone is still dead, but now you're starting to wonder if you even remember how to use one. A monk near the front clears his throat. Everyone freezes. He nods, resumes eating. You release your breath slowly. That's how thin the line is between holiness and horror here. Even a cough is an event. You notice something new today. A small iron bell hanging near the reader's podium. You ask yourself what it's for silently. No answer comes. Perhaps it signals the end of the meal. Perhaps it signals someone's spiritual failure. You silently hope it won't be you. The meal ends. You bow your head for prayer. You rise. The bowl is empty again. The bread is half eaten. You do not pocket it today. You're learning. Outside, the air is crisp and full of fog. You return your bowl to the scullery without a word. The monk there nods. That's high praise. Your feet guide you back toward the scriptorium, not because you're expected there, but because the silence is starting to make more sense among the written words. You sit at a bench, the parchment crackles, you dip your quill. You begin to copy, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." The ink smudges. You try again. Hours later, you return to your cell. Gerald the candle is waiting. The walls are damp. Your knees are tired. Your soul is oddly settled. The discomfort hasn't gone, but it's become familiar, manageable, like an old injury. That doesn't hurt anymore, just hums in the background. You lie down. The cold creeps into your feet. You curl slightly. You whisper thank you. Not sure if it's to the day, the pottage, or the silence, but something inside you hears it. You're woken today not by the bell, but by your own ribs, specifically the sensation that they are trying to eat themselves. It's a new kind of hunger, not sharp or dramatic, but low and persistent, like a dull ache in your soul. You sit up slowly, half expecting to see your stomach groan like a cartoon. Gerald the candle has burned out, leaving a waxy halo on the windowsill, like he died for your sins. The cell feels colder than usual. You shake out your robe, which emits a cloud of dust or possibly powdered regret. You throw it over your shoulders, feet already numb against the flagstones. You no longer flinch when they touch the ground. That phase ended around day 3. Now you just accept it, like you accept most discomforts here. The bell rings. You stand. You move. Today is a fast day. Again, you've stopped trying to understand the calendar. It's easier to assume that food is a rare and unpredictable visitor. Monastic life isn't built around meals, it's built around not having them. Fasting isn't occasional here, it's a lifestyle. And yet somehow, meals still occur. You suspect they exist not to nourish, but to remind you of what you're giving up. You shuffle with the others into the chapel for lauds. The chanting is soft, almost apologetic. You notice for the first time how the incense clings to the beams above, like smoke that's afraid to leave. Your head bows with the rest, but your thoughts drift toward the kitchen. Is anyone there yet? Is the barley soaking? Is the beet alive? When the service ends, a monk gestures for you to follow. You're not assigned to the scriptorium or the garden today. Instead, you're taken to the cellar, an arched, chilly space where food is stored, sorted, and hidden like it's contraband. You descend stone steps slick with moss. The smell changes immediately. It's earthy, musty, and oddly cheesy. Barrels line the walls, sacks of grain, clay jugs sealed with wax. A row of cheeses sits aging on wooden slats. You walk past them like royalty, half expecting them to whisper. This is where the monastery hides its treasures. Your job? Inventory. In silence, of course. You're handed a tablet and a small piece of charcoal. Each mark represents a sack, a jug, a wheel. You count slowly, hungrily. The cheese wheels seem to multiply the longer you stare at them. You wonder how many are actually eaten and how many are saved for feast days, or saints' days, or bribes. You reach a jar labeled honey. Your hands tremble slightly. The lid is sealed with hardened wax, so you can't open it. But your nose gets close, you breathe in sweetness, real sweetness. You haven't tasted it in days, maybe weeks. It smells like memory. You look around, no one's watching. You don't dare. There's a fringe debate among historians about just how strict monastic fasting was in practice. Some believe monks snuck small treats between official meals, cheese, honey, the occasional egg, so long as they didn't break the fast technically. Others argue these indulgences were rare exceptions and harshly punished. All you know is that if you had a spoon right now, that honey wouldn't stand a chance. You return to the surface with your tallies complete. Your reward? Dinner time, which, ironically, lands in the mid-afternoon again. You're beginning to see why dinner is the only meal they bother naming. Everything else is just silence in the shape of hunger. You enter the refectory as always, now with the mindless obedience of a cow heading to the milking stall. Your seat welcomes you with the same unyielding slab of indifference. You bow your head. The monk begins reading. Today's selection is a letter from St. Bernard of Clairvaux on resisting temptation. You wonder if he ever smelled a jar of honey on an empty stomach. Your bowl arrives. It is soup. A thinner than usual pottage, with visible lentils floating like survivors of a shipwreck. There is no bread today. This may be mercy or cruelty. You're no longer sure which. You lift your spoon. The soup tastes warm, watery, faintly peppery. There is a single piece of turnip. It's soft, almost buttery. For a second, you're overcome. Not with gratitude, just with the thrill of variety. You chew with reverence. Across the table, a monk sneezes into his sleeve with the sound of a breaking hymnal. No one reacts. Your ale is weaker today, almost flat. It tastes like regret and hay. You sip slowly, wondering whether it's thinner to symbolize fasting or just a bad batch. You make a mental note. Never become the monk in charge of brewing. Midway through the meal, you make the mistake of looking up. Your eyes meet another novice's. He looks just as hungry as you. In that moment, a dangerous spark of humanity passes between you. He raises an eyebrow slightly. It's practically a rebellion. You look away quickly, but the damage is done. You remember that you're a person, that you had a name once, that you used to eat meals with salt and talking. The bell rings. The prayer concludes. You rise, bowl empty, soul moderately intact. The hunger is still there, of course, but now it hums like background noise, a dull ache that has learned patience. Outside, the sun is low, the cloister is colder. You pause at the fountain in the center. A thin sheet of ice has formed over it. You crack it with your finger. The sound is oddly satisfying. You return to your cell. The waxy halo of Gerald's remains greets you. You light a fresh stub. The flame sputters. The shadows lean in close. You lie down, hunger curling beside you like an old dog. You whisper something to the silence. Maybe it's a prayer, maybe it's a recipe, and then you sleep. You've stopped dreaming of food. That's the first sign. Something's changed. Your subconscious has finally accepted that no roasted meat, no honeycomb, no crusty loaf hot from a bakery oven is going to appear anytime soon. Not here, not in this life. Instead, your dream last night was just walking down a long hallway, lined with candles that flickered away when you got near. You woke up tired. You stretch on the straw mattress, careful not to knock your elbow into the wall. There's a damp patch forming there now, dark and spreading like a medieval Rorschach test. It smells faintly of lichen. You stare at it for a long moment, thinking it might say something profound. It doesn't. You pull on your robe and step into the corridor. Your feet have developed a relationship with the floor, a cold, gritty, mildly adversarial relationship. You no longer flinch when the stone bites back. You simply accept it, like you accept the silence, the hunger, the relentless structure. The monastery is no longer strange. It's just your world now. At morning prayers, you don't try to follow the Latin anymore. You just let the chanting roll over you, a sea of syllables that sound more like weather than language. Your mind wanders not far, just gently away. You count the drips of wax on the floor. You wonder who cleans them. You think about the candle's slow death. After prayers, you're directed to the refectory, not for a meal, of course not, but for another round of eating in silence. The monks file in, each face as blank and inward as the last. You sit, waiting. The bench offers no comfort. It never has. You imagine it has absorbed centuries of penance and is now made entirely of it. Today's pottage arrives with a small, surprising addition, a sprig of parsley. It sits atop the lentils like an apology. You stare at it. You don't know what to do. Is it edible? Is it decoration? Is it a test? You eat it first, just in case. It tastes green, very green. Not good, not bad, just alive. Then you dig into the bowl. Same texture, same faintly onioned mush. But that one note of green has tricked your senses. The rest tastes slightly better, maybe. Or maybe you've just forgotten what better is. Across the table, a monk spills. His spoon. The drop hits the bench with a splat. He freezes. You all freeze. No one speaks. He bows his head and slowly wipes it with the edge of his sleeve. No eye contact, no sound. The silence reasserts itself like a warden. This is the part you've started to understand on a deeper level. The silence isn't just a rule, it's a wall. It keeps everything out. Laughter, anger, conversation, doubt. It's a velvet prison, soundproof and polite. But underneath it, everything still churns. You remember the first day, how loud the quiet felt, how every chew seemed amplified, every motion a crime. Now you barely notice. You've become fluent in glances, in stillness. You understand the weight of a single cough, the thrill of a raised eyebrow. There's an ongoing debate among historians about how strictly silence was enforced in medieval monasteries. Some argue it was idealized more than practiced, that murmured exchanges and whispered jokes were common. Others believe the silence was absolute, a daily discipline as binding as any vow. You suspect the truth is somewhere in between. You've seen a monk blink very slowly at another monk, and that blink said everything. You eat the rest of the pottage carefully, respectfully. You leave nothing behind, not because you're full, but because waste feels like a sin here. The ale is warm, again, flat, less offensive than usual, which you count as a blessing. As you finish, you notice something unexpected. One of the elder monks, face like crumpled parchment, eyes sunk deep, nods at you. Just once. Barely perceptible. But it happens. You feel a flush of something like recognition, or possibly dehydration. Either way, you nod back. After the meal, the usual prayer. You rise, the monks file out, you follow. The routine carries you like a river, and for once, you stop fighting the current. Your next task is manual labor in the cloister garden. You're handed a small spade and pointed toward the edge of a row of dormant herbs. The soil is frozen in places, clumpy in others. You dig anyway. You loosen the roots. You clear away old leaves. You work in silence beside two others who neither glance at you nor ignore you. Their presence is neutral, steady. You begin to feel normal. Lunch doesn't happen. But that's not surprising anymore. The rhythm of feast and fast is starting to make sense in its own warped way. You realize it's less about food and more about control. You've stopped waiting to be fed. You just accept. It's disturbingly liberating. Late afternoon comes. Another bell. Dinner. The refectory again. Now almost familiar. The same cold bench. The same heavy wooden bowl. Today's offering is thicker, heartier. You catch a glimpse of lentils, leeks, maybe even garlic. It smells stronger, sharper. You're grateful. You're suspicious. The monk begins reading, something about humility. You don't really hear the words, but the tone is comforting, almost lulling. You eat slowly, not because you want to savor, but because you've learned that the faster you eat, the longer the hunger lasts after. This way, your stomach is tricked. Briefly, you take a sip of ale and almost cough. It's stronger today, slightly fermented, or possibly infected. You drink again anyway. One of the brothers, tall, grim, possibly named Silence Incarnate, drops his spoon. It clangs loudly. No one reacts, but the energy shifts. You all feel it. He retrieves it slowly, folds back into stillness. You finish your bowl. You bow your head. You rise. The ritual, always the same, feels less like routine and more like religion now. And maybe that's the point. Outside, the wind has picked up. You tug your robe tighter. The sky is dark already. You pass a novice near the fountain, eyes red-rimmed from crying or onions or both. You nod slightly. He doesn't nod back. He's not ready yet. Back in your cell, the darkness welcomes you like an old friend. Gerald's replacement flickers. Weakly, you lie down. You realize with a strange calm that no one here has spoken to you in days, not a word. And yet you've never felt more spoken to. The silence has teeth, but you've learned how not to flinch. The sound of the bell doesn't startle you anymore. It just enters your world like weather, uninvited, unavoidable, not worth reacting to. You rise as though you've been doing this for years, though your joints protest like they still remember. Beds with springs and sheets. You dress in the robe, which has taken on the permanent scent of ash, damp wool, and spiritual compromise. Your fingers are already tracing the familiar path down the corridor before you've even opened your eyes fully. You arrive at the chapel half awake, but it doesn't matter. Everything in the monastery runs on rails now. Your body knows where to be, when to bow, when to nod, when to chew. You don't have to think anymore. That's either peace or surrender. Possibly both. After prayers, your name, if you still have one, is scribbled on a wax tablet and handed to the kitchen brother. You are summoned, this time not to stir the pot, but to join a different, rarer ritual, the brewing of ale. You did not know you were ready for this. But something in your stomach, possibly still lined with yesterday's leak-heavy pottage, perks up. You follow a narrow corridor past the scullery and into the brewery, a low-ceilinged, musky space that smells of barley, yeast, damp linen, and 1,000 stubborn traditions. It's warmer here. You linger near the fire just long enough to stop shivering. Brother Pyrrhus, the brewing monk whose arms are thicker than your thighs and whose face has not smiled since 1173, hands you a bucket. It is not an invitation. You follow him silently as he begins the daily preparation. The ale is made from malted barley, water, and thyme. That's it. No hops, no carbonation, no joy. But it has calories, and in this place, that makes it precious. You watch as the grains are soaked, then mashed. You stir, you strain. You inhale a strange, sweet, sour scent that feels like something halfway between nourishment and mild intoxication. The monks drink this ale daily because it's safer than water, because it fills the gaps food leaves behind, and because it numbs just enough to be allowed. It's weak by modern standards, barely alcoholic, but it has body, it has warmth. You are allowed to sample a spoonful from the warm mash. It tastes like soggy oatmeal and ambition, but it's food, sort of. You don't complain. There's a long-running scholarly debate about how much alcohol monastic ale contained. Some records suggest it was barely fermented, designed not to inebriate, but to sustain. Others argue that monks developed high alcohol, brews specifically for fasting days where food was forbidden, but drinks were conveniently not. You suspect Brother Ferris belongs to the second camp. His eyebrows twitch with dangerous knowledge. As the afternoon wears on, you're excused from the brewery and return to the courtyard where you take your place in line for the main meal. Dinner arrives like clockwork, and your place on the bench feels almost tailored now. The wood even seems to protest less under your weight. Or maybe you've simply wasted away enough that the bench is winning. You glance at your bowl and pause. It's thicker today. Not quite porridge, not quite pottage. Somewhere in between. You smell lentils again, and possibly dried fish. You stir cautiously. A small piece of something grayish-pink floats to the surface. You eat it. It has a texture. That's as far as you can go. But what's new, what makes this meal momentous, is the ale. Today, for the first time, you receive a full clay cup of it, brewed hours ago, still warm. It smells faintly of grain and patience. You sip. It's thick. Yeasty, slightly sour with a whisper of sweetness and a stronger whisper of wet bread. You swallow. It coats your tongue like a memory. You sip again. It's not delicious, but it's substantial. It does something that the soup never quite managed. It lingers. You glance around and notice that other monks sip slowly too, reverently. The ale is not a break from the rules. It is part of the ritual, measured, modest, and slightly numbing. You can feel it start to warm your chest. Or maybe that's just the room finally heating up. You don't care which. The reader today is back to Scripture, a passage about the body being a vessel. You wonder briefly what your vessel contains. Lentils, mostly, and at least a pint of liquid penance. Halfway through your cup, you feel something odd. Not full, but not entirely hollow either. A rare sensation. You savor it like a dessert you'll never see. You finish the bowl. You wipe your spoon on the hem of your robe, which by now has become an all-purpose cloth for spiritual living. The ale is gone. You consider licking the cup. You don't, but only because someone might see. The bell rings. You rise. The silence persists. But tonight it feels less oppressive, almost companionable. You've begun to sense moods through the quiet, the solemnity of prayer, the grim resolve of fasting, the rare flicker of pleasure during ale day. You even catch one monk closing his eyes while sipping, just for a second. A rebellion disguised as reverence. You leave the refectory and step into the open air. It's raining, of course, it always is, but the rain feels gentler tonight. Less like punishment, more like punctuation. You return to your cell, toes squelching in your sandals. Gerald's replacement is burning strong. You sit cross-legged, robe wrapped tight, and exhale. The ale is still in you, not as buzz but as ballast. You think suddenly about water. Cold, fresh water. A glass of it. Ice clinking. Condensation on your palm. You think about pressing that glass to your forehead on a summer day. You shake your head gently. That world is gone. But this one, this cloistered, aching, silent world, it's real. And inside its narrow rhythms, there's something steadier than pleasure. Tonight, your stomach isn't empty, and that's something close to a miracle. The bell wakes you again. But this morning you're already sitting up when it tolls, legs hanging over the edge of your straw-stuffed mattress, like they've forgotten what sleep is supposed to feel like. You rub your eyes, now so used to the dark that the faintest glow from the hallway feels blinding. Gerald's replacement burned out sometime in the night, leaving a glob of wax and the smell of scorched linen. You nod at him anyway. The ritual must be kept. Your robe feels heavier than usual, and not just from moisture. There's a thickness in the air this morning, a kind of emotional fog that doesn't lift even as you step into the corridor. Maybe it's the cold, maybe it's the fact that today is your 10th day here, or maybe it's just your intestines remembering what lentils do after a few days of quiet buildup. You follow the silent column of monks into morning prayers. The chapel smells like old stone and newer regret. As the chanting begins, you notice the sounds around you more than ever. The scrape of sandals, the cough that someone tries to hide in their sleeve, the wet sniffle of a novice who probably regrets every decision that led him here. It's peaceful, but it's also the kind of peace that demands you surrender absolutely everything: voice, appetite, personality. After prayers, you expect to be sent back to the brewery or the garden or the scriptorium, but instead, a small wooden tablet is placed in your hand, its wax surface etched with a single drawing: a hand, a bowl, and a face. You've been assigned to serve. You follow the monk who handed it to you into a small anteroom connected to the refectory. There, the kitchen brothers are lining up trays, each holding bowls of the day's meal, some version of pottage, of course, but chunkier today, with what appears to be actual pieces of carrot floating in the mix. This is exciting. This is revolutionary. This could be treason. You're handed a tray and shown where to stand. Then you wait. The bell tolls again. A prayer is whispered, and the doors open. Monks begin to file in as usual, faces expressionless, eyes down. You walk slowly, reverently, placing a bowl before each seated brother, your own steps measured and deliberate. You're not just delivering food, you're participating in a liturgy. You are now part of someone else's ritual. You begin to notice details that escaped you as a diner. How some monks glance up at the bowl with a flicker of private gratitude. How others hesitate before picking up their spoon, as if timing their first bite with a memory. One older monk closes his eyes and inhales the steam. You wonder what he's remembering. Something better? Or something worse? You serve your last bowl and retreat to the back of the hall, where guests and novitiates without seats of their own are allowed to eat. You're handed your own bowl at last. You sit alone, spoon in hand, observing rather than participating in today's scripture reading. That alone is enough to make the meal feel strange. Today's pottage is not bad. The carrots make a difference. There's an extra hint of texture, something to push against with your teeth. It reminds you that food isn't just fuel, it's friction, it's life bumping against the edges of routine. Your bread is warm, you don't question it, you just tear into it like a medieval raccoon, trying not to look suspicious. You drink your ale slower now, out of habit and out of respect. It's the one consistent indulgence allowed. And it somehow tastes better after watching someone else receive. Monks don't look at each other during meals, but today you feel eyes on you. A single brief glance from a brother seated near the front, one of the senior monks, face worn like driftwood, hands folded before his bowl even after it's empty. He blinks slowly, once. A gesture of approval? A test? Or did he just swallow? Wrong? Either way, you hold the moment in your chest like a glowing coal. Something happened, something wordless, which means something monastic. The meal ends as always. The prayer is muttered, the bowls are stacked. You gather yours and return it to the scullery without spilling a drop. A small nod from the dish brother. You nod back. It's the closest you've come to applause in 10 days. You're assigned to corridor maintenance next. This means sweeping again. But this time, the broom feels different in your hand, not lighter, just Yours, like a part of the rhythm. Like another tool in the great awkward machine of monastic life, you sweep the northern corridor, you sweep the cloister steps, you pause near the library door and watch as a monk passes, carrying 3 books so carefully they could be kittens. You exhale through your nose, the wind picks up, your robe flaps, your stomach growls. Dinner time again, back to the bench, back to the bowl. This time the pottage is watery again, possibly to balance the morning's extravagance. You don't mind. Your expectations have been permanently altered. You chew and listen. The reader tonight recites a passage from a sermon on temperance. The body must be made obedient, he drones, for the soul to rise. You nod slightly, though your intestines seem to disagree. You eat the bread more slowly tonight. You chew until it becomes paste. You sip the ale and wonder whether the yeast is doing something meaningful or just giving you something to blame for the headache you've had since sunrise. A monk across the hall accidentally bumps his spoon off the table. It hits the stone floor with a sharp metallic echo. He freezes. The room freezes. The reader stops mid-word. No one moves. For 10 heartbeats, the room holds its breath. Then the monk bows his head, picks up the spoon, wipes it on his robe, and continues eating. The reader resumes. The silence refolds itself around you like a damp blanket. You finish your meal, rise with the rest, and file out under a sky now soaked in stars. The cold bites harder tonight, sharp and personal. You return to your cell and light a fresh candle. The flame catches fast. You watch it, wondering briefly what it would take to feel warm again. You lie down. The day folds over you. Your belly isn't full, but it isn't empty either. That's a victory. You've learned how to disappear into the rules, how to eat without being seen, how to exist without speaking. You drift off, imagining yourself in the same place tomorrow, same bench, same bowl, same barely noticeable nod from someone who's decided you belong, and that's what passes for comfort now. You dreamt of being full. Not of food exactly, just fullness itself, like your body had forgotten what satiety meant and tried to conjure it from thin air. In the dream, you were weightless, hovering just above your straw mattress, your robe trailing like steam, drifting toward the smell of something roasted. When you awoke, your mouth was open, your pillow damp, and your stomach louder than your thoughts. The morning is cruel. You dress without speaking, without thinking. The robe is cold, the air colder. Your bones creak with the same slow rhythm as the monastery bell, as though it's ringing from inside you now. You pass Gerald's latest successor, a candle stub, flickering as if unsure whether this life is worth continuing. You nod to it anyway. That's what you do now. You nod at things. You file into chapel as always. The prayers are droned in long nasal tones, but your ears are tuned elsewhere, to the grumble of your own body, to the dry crackle in your throat, to the shifting weight of hunger that never really leaves, only rotates. You kneel, you rise, you bow, you murmur, you endure. After prayers, you're sent, not to the kitchen, not to the garden, not even to corridor duty, but to the gate. You are today's porter's assistant. This, you're told, through a series of gestures and blank. Stares is a privilege. Few are permitted outside contact. Fewer still get to witness what lies beyond the monastery walls. You try not to show your reaction, though it flutters somewhere between excitement and dread. The gatehouse is a small, cold stone chamber with a wooden table, a stool, and a heavy iron bell that no one touches. You sit. You wait. Your first visitor is not a visitor at all, but a beggar, a man dressed in rags, face red from wind, hands chapped into raw patches. He says nothing. He just looks at you. The monk porter beside you gives you a slight nod. You rise and walk back into the corridor toward the kitchen annex, where you collect a bowl. It's not much. Leftovers from yesterday's meal, if leftover is the right word for something that was barely meal to begin with. But still, it's food. You place it outside the gate with quiet hands. The beggar nods. He does not thank you. He just begins to eat, crouched like an animal in the wind. You sit back down. A strange quiet enters you. You've been the one starving, eating in silence, moving in rituals designed to suppress every craving. And now you've passed on that silence to someone else, as if hunger could be transferred like warmth. There's an ancient rule, still debated by historians, that monasteries were required to keep food aside for the poor every day, no matter how little they had. Some say it was generosity. Others argue it was a carefully measured form of spiritual superiority. You watch the beggar eat and decide it's both. Later, a woman arrives, older, with a bundle of cloth at her hip and eyes. Sunken from worry, she's lost, or looking for someone, or maybe just cold. She doesn't speak. She doesn't have to. The porter sends you again. This time, you bring bread, old, hard, but real, and a flask of weak ale. The woman drinks the ale first, fast, like it's courage. She holds the bread in both hands for a moment before breaking it apart. She weeps, silently. You do nothing. You are not permitted to comfort, to speak, to break the code. You only serve. That is your voice now. When you return to the porter's stool, your stomach has stopped growling, not because it's full, but because it understands something new. Eventually, your shift ends. You're replaced by another novice who gives you a sideways glance that might be envy or pity. You nod. It doesn't matter. You're late to dinner because of your post, and by the time you arrive, only a few bowls remain. You take the last one and sit at the guest table near the rear wall. The pottage is thinner today, pale and watery, flecked with greens that have long since surrendered to boiling. Your bread is more crust than crumb, but you eat slowly, methodically, remembering the man outside the gate, remembering the woman. The monk reader is halfway through a tale from the life of St. Francis, something about giving up a feast for a stone and a dry crust. You listen with new ears. You chew with new teeth. Across the room, you notice the same elder monk watching you again. Not sternly, just steadily. You nod. He doesn't nod back. He doesn't have to. When the prayer ends and the bowls are cleared, you rise with the others. But instead of filing out with the usual procession, you pause at the door and look back. You see the long tables, the rows of wooden bowls, the reader's podium, the flickering torches casting shadows on the saints painted into the stone. And you realize this is not a place that feeds you. It's a place that teaches you how to be hungry. You step into the cold. Outside, the wind cuts sharp against your face. You pull your robe tighter. You return your bowl. You wash it yourself. The scullery is quiet. You scrub the wood with a cold rag and ashes, the way you've seen the monks do. You dry it on your sleeve. You place it on the shelf. You return to your cell in the dark. Gerald is gone. His replacement is lit. You thank it out loud before catching yourself. The silence feels less like absence now, more like the space in which things happen. You lie down. You pull the robe over your feet. You close your eyes. You are not full. You are not warm. But someone else was, because of you, and that's a different kind of nourishment. You wake with the strange sensation that your body is missing something. Not in pain exactly, just hollow, like a chest you once filled with belongings and then slowly emptied until now it echoes with every movement. You sit up. The straw rustles beneath you like dry leaves. You swing your feet over the edge and brace yourself for the cold stones which greet you, as always, with the welcome of a slap. You shuffle into the hallway, robe clinging to your legs, and step back into the monastery's clockwork rhythm. The same candlelit corridor, the same slow procession of silent monks, the same sharp incense waiting in the chapel. But today, something is different. Not in the air. In you, you've stopped expecting, stopped wanting, stopped waiting for anything other than what comes. Prayers flow over you. You don't fight them. You don't follow them either. You just exist in the hum, in the echo of Latin syllables too. Old for translation, too heavy for resistance. After the final chant, you're redirected toward the rear kitchens. Another task, another silence. Today's duty, cleaning the bowls, not just rinsing them, scrubbing them, scouring them down to the grain, with nothing but sand, cold water, and a stiff bristled brush that feels like it was designed by someone with a grudge. There are dozens stacked in a bucket, still sticky with lentils and crusted barley, because apparently last night's scraps didn't get the memo about spiritual purification. You kneel beside the trough and plunge your hands into the water. It's colder than expected. You wince, but you don't pull back. You just begin. The brush scrapes across wood. The sound is dull, rhythmic, unpleasant, but oddly satisfying, a soft scraping of service, of erasure. Halfway through the pile, you find one bowl with a deep crack running through it, not split, just damaged. You show it to the monk overseeing the task. He takes it in his hand, examines it closely, then gives it back to you with a slow nod. You understand, clean it anyway. We don't discard what's broken here. You think about that bowl longer than you should. When the work is done, your fingers are numb. Your robe is damp to the elbows. The monk overseeing you places a hand on your shoulder for the briefest moment. Just a brush, not affection, not approval, just acknowledgement. And then he's gone. You head toward the cloister walk to dry your sleeves in the weak morning sun. The wind coils around the stone pillars like a warning. A few leaves scuttle across the courtyard, brown, brittle, loud in their lightness. You watch them disappear into the corners. You're hungry, of course, always. But now it's less of a scream and more of a companion, a quiet fellow traveler just behind you, breathing with you. A familiar shape in the shadows. Dinner comes early again, as always. You find your place on the bench like you were carved for it. The bowl arrives. You don't look up. You just eat. Today the pottage has cabbage, possibly boiled for days. It's pale, stringy, and smells faintly of regret. But it's warm, and you chew it without judgment. There is bread too, harder than usual, and ale that tastes like it caught a cold, but none of it offends you. The reader recites from a treatise on obedience. His voice cracks occasionally. He pauses to cough, then resumes. No one reacts. No one offers help. Because help is not what we do here, not in words at least. You offer help by stepping in silently, by carrying, by serving, by doing the thing. No one asked you to do and never mentioning it again. As the reading drones on, you glance around the hall, not for connection, but for confirmation. And you realize something strange. The faces you once found unreadable now speak volumes. You see the weariness in the young monk's slumped shoulders, the quiet fire in the elder's locked jaw, the flicker of satisfaction in the smallest upturn of a novice's mouth when the pottage isn't as thin. You know these people now, and none of them have spoken to you. You finish your bowl and leave the spoon resting just so. Handle tilted slightly to the left, bowl up. That's how they do it here. No one told you. You just learned. Outside, the wind has risen. Clouds churn low across the sky. You help carry the bowls to the scullery before you're even asked. Your next assignment is a rare one, assisting in the calefactory. A calefactory, if you've never had the joy, is the one room in the entire monastery that's intentionally heated. It's small, stone-walled, contains a hearth and a few battered benches. It's meant to keep the monks from freezing during the coldest months. You're not allowed to linger there. But today, you're allowed to stoke the fire. You kneel beside the embers, feeding small logs into the coals, watching as they catch and shift color. The orange glow flickers against the walls like a soft warning. A monk passes behind you, pauses, warms his hands briefly, then moves on. You stay longer than you should. The warmth seeps into your knees, into your chest, into your jaw, which has been clenched since yesterday. You don't smile, but you feel the edges of something approaching relief. Historians debate how often calefactories were used, whether monks abused the privilege of warmth or avoided it out of guilt. You understand both now, To sit by fire is to admit you need it, and here, need is something you try not to have. Eventually, you rise and extinguish the lightest flame. Leave just enough for the next one to find. You wipe soot from your hands onto your robe. No one notices. Or they all do. It doesn't matter anymore. That night, back in your cell, you find a splinter embedded in your finger from the bowl you scrubbed that morning. You dig it out with a sharp fingernail. No blood, just a tiny ache. You hold it in your hand for a moment before dropping it to the floor. You lie down. The robe is still damp, the room still cold, but the hunger tonight feels deserved. Like it's not punishing you, but reminding you of something. You turn on your side, and just before you sleep, you whisper to no one. The cracked bowl is clean. You open your eyes before the bell. Not out of rest, but from the heaviness of not sleeping. The straw beneath you has formed familiar grooves. Your shoulder lies in one, your spine in another. A ridge runs across your lower back that might as well be carved from the mattress itself. You lie there for a moment, unmoving, letting the cold seep into your limbs like a second robe. There's a silence in your cell that isn't peace. It's a silence so deep it feels heavier than noise, one you've grown used to, one you wear like a second skin. When the bell tolls, it sounds distant, like it's being rung underwater. You sit up slowly, the robe folding around you with the reluctant softness of old paper. You light your candle, Gerald's great-grandchild perhaps, and nod to its small, stuttering flame. You're not sure why you keep doing that, but it feels right. It feels like continuity. You step into the corridor. The procession has already begun, brown robes moving like slow-moving branches in a windless wood. You fall into line and shuffle toward the chapel, your sandals brushing against the stone in perfect sync with the others. It's eerie how you've begun to move without thought, to breathe with the room. Morning prayers pass like mist. You kneel. You stand. You chant without voice. You no longer try to decipher the Latin. You let it roll over you like a language for the bones, not the mind. After prayers, you're pulled aside. A new assignment, one you haven't yet encountered. Today, you're to assist in Scriptoria Mortuorum, the Scriptoria of the dead. It's a quiet room off the east corridor, rarely used, where names of deceased monks are recorded by hand, one by one, in a leather-bound volume. Each name receives a line, a date, a brief notation: peaceful, fever, falling masonry, God's mercy, that sort of thing. You're handed a quill. A monk points to a blank page. Your hand shakes as you begin. The ink smells metallic, faintly sour. The parchment is thick and stubborn beneath your pen. You write slowly, deliberately, knowing each stroke will outlast you. The dead are sacred here, not because they're mourned, but because they've completed the rhythm. Finish the meal, their hunger is done. You copy the names in silence. You pause at a few. Some were young, some old. A few entries are smudged. You wonder if those were tears or just spilled ink. You look up once to see the elder monk seated at the far end of the room, the same one who has watched you these past weeks with that unreadable expression. He's writing too, but faster. His page is almost full. You look down at yours. You've written 6 names. He's written 30. You return the quill and bow. He nods once. That's enough. You're dismissed early from scriptorium duties today. You walk slowly through the cloister, feet dragging slightly. Your hunger is muted, more an ache than a need now. But it's there, curled low in your gut, humming the same note it has every day. As you pass the fountain, you hear the faint splash of water. A novice is crouched there, trying to wash his hands in the freezing basin. His robe sleeves are soaked, face pale and drawn. He looks up at you. There's no greeting, but something in his expression says, help. You pull your own sleeve down, cup your hands, and help him rinse the soap from his fingers. The water bites like knives. Neither of you flinch. When you're done, he bows low, too. Low. You nod, he disappears. You don't tell anyone. Dinner arrives without warning. A bell, a prayer, a bowl. The pottage tonight is thin, almost translucent. You count 2 lentils before you stop counting. But it's hot, and you cradle it in, your hands longer than usual, letting the steam soften your face. The bread is stale enough to build with. You dip it into the soup until it dissolves into paste. Then scrape it off the spoon like medicine. The ale is weak again, barely ale, more ghost of ale, but it wets your throat. You drink it slowly, spacing each sip like punctuation. The reader tonight doesn't read scripture. He recites the rule, line by line, clause by clause. Let the brother eat in silence, giving thanks for what is sufficient. It goes on. If one receives more, let him be humbled. If less, let him not grumble. You chew, you listen, you nod, you realize something. There is no comfort here, only clarity, no indulgence, only survival. But within that survival, within the grind of daily discomfort, there's a rhythm so precise it starts to feel like music. You begin to understand why monks chose this, not for misery, but for predictability. In a world of chaos, the monastery offers rules and a bowl. You finish the meal. You bow your head, you rise with the others. Outside, the wind is cruel tonight. It slaps your cheeks, bites your hands, rakes your ankles. You pull the robe tighter, but it doesn't help. You endure. You're sent to the chapel to assist with Vespers preparation. The candles need trimming. The mats must be brushed. The incense prepared. You do this slowly, reverently, as you've seen others do. A monk walks by and adjusts the angle of the candlestick you placed. He says nothing, but you note the correction. Next time, you'll do it right. You remain after Vespers, alone, in the quiet chapel. The candles flicker in their iron holders. You sit in the back row, not praying exactly, but thinking, or trying not to. The air smells of ash and old books. You wonder briefly what your name would look like in the scriptorium record. How many lentils would be in your final bowl? You return to your cell late. Gerald's air flickers patiently. You lie down without blowing him out. You stare at the ceiling until the shadows start to blur, and then, just before sleep takes you, you whisper to the silence, "Still hungry? But I know the rules now." You dream you are a bowl, not holding anything, just being. Empty, wooden, chipped, passed from hand to hand in a long, unbroken chain of motion. Sometimes you're filled, mostly you're scraped, sometimes you're washed. But mostly, you wait. You wake with the eerie clarity of someone who has finally understood their place in the story. The bell is late today, or maybe you're early. It doesn't matter. You rise before the sound, pull on your robe, adjust your hood, light the candle. The motions are muscle now, not thought. The wick sputters and catches. You don't nod to it this time. You just move. The hallway feels narrower this morning, the stone tighter. The silence more demanding. Your legs ache. Your fingers are stiff. Your stomach doesn't even bother to complain anymore. Hunger is just your atmosphere now, like wind, like dusk, a background presence. Prayers pass like breath. You kneel on command. You chant by instinct. You smell the usual incense, frankincense, dust, a faint hint of damp stone that no incense can cover. You bow. You rise. You leave. Your assignment is scrawled in wax again. Paul Perez. You've been sent back to assist with the poor, not at the gate this time. At the rear courtyard, where beggars are allowed to rest, to receive scraps and slivers, to exist just long. Enough to be acknowledged, but not long enough to be invited in. You're handed a basket of bread ends, crusts so hard they could chip teeth, and a small pitcher of the weakest ale, thinned with water and probably prayer. You approach the gate slowly, head down. They're already there, 4 of them. 1 old, hunched like a comma. 1 young, face smudged, eyes hollow. 2 in between, sallow men with skin like overripe pears and hands that haven't held tools in years. You say nothing, of course. You offer the bread in silence, lowering the basket to a stone slab. One of them reaches too quickly, and you see the guilt in his face before the others have even noticed. He bows his head. You do too. Thais, youngest, takes the pitcher with both hands. He drinks, then passes it. No hoarding, no rushing. You realize they too have rules. They have learned the same lessons in different ways. One of them coughs, wet deep from the ribs. The sound echoes against the walls. You freeze. He looks up and offers something like a smile, not of warmth, but of awareness. You nod. You've forgotten what your own smile feels like. You return to the refectory late. The monks have already begun eating. You take your place in the guest row. The bowl today is cold. You eat it anyway. No bread. The reader recites a passage about humility, about lowering oneself before God, before men, before appetite. Let he who wishes to be first become the least of all. You sip your ale. It tastes like leaf water and low expectations. You finish the bowl. No one speaks. No one has in days. The silence is a wall you no longer lean against. It's a wall you've become part of. After the meal, you're summoned. A monk gestures you into a narrow hallway you've never entered. The walls are older here, darker, fewer windows, more echoes. You pass doors that remain closed. You reach a final room and are motioned inside. It's not a punishment, not exactly. It's the storage room for broken tools. Shelves line the walls, cracked bowls, bent spoons, chipped cups, threadbare robes. Items that haven't been discarded but aren't in use either. A halfway place. You're told, with a glance and a motion, to sort them, to clean, to repair. You pick up a bowl with a splintered rim. You sand it with a cloth. You find a spoon with a twisted handle. You straighten it. You mend a robe with clumsy stitching. Thread through wool. Knot. Tug. Repeat. You spend hours in silence, surrounded by discarded things, and yet you feel strangely comforted. These items were used, worn, then set aside, but not thrown away. You wonder what category you're in after your work is done. You leave the room without ceremony. No one checks your progress. No one nods. You walk through the hallway like a ghost. Evening brings another meal. You find your bowl already placed, as if someone expected you. You sit without, adjusting your robe. The food is exactly what you expect, but beside your bowl is something new. A cloth napkin, small, square, plain white, unfolded. It's not decoration. It's not reward. It's not mistake. You fold it neatly and place it in your lap. You eat the pottage with slow, even movements. You drink the ale in 3 measured sips. You finish the bread, chew every crumb. Across the table, the elder monk looks up. Just once. You don't nod this time. You don't need to. The prayer ends. You rise. Outside, it's colder than ever. The wind howls low around the cloisters, pushing. At the corners, like a wild animal trying to get in. You walk back to your cell slowly. No rush. You know the shape of the dark now. It doesn't frighten you. Inside, you light your candle. You stare at the flame for a long time. It bends in the draft from the window, but refuses to go out. You lie down. The robe is soft in the elbows now. You've worn it smooth. You close your eyes, and for the first time you feel full, not in your stomach, but somewhere deeper. Not satisfied, but seen. The morning air feels older. You wake before the bell again. Though now you wonder if the bell wakes for you. The room around you holds its breath. Your joints ache as always, but today they seem quieter about it, like even pain knows it has to whisper in this place. You rise, you move. The robe slides over your shoulders with the ease of habit. It fits differently now, not because it's changed, but because you have. You're thinner, lighter, but not in the way you feared. You light your candle, watch it flicker, then tilt it toward Gerald's distant descendant and nod. He doesn't answer, he doesn't need to. The hallway is quiet, as always. But today the silence feels different. Less like absence, more like presence. As if something is watching, not to judge, but simply to witness. The walls feel thicker, the light dimmer. The cold somehow more personal. You welcome it. Prayers come and go. You no longer think of them as ceremonies. They're just another breath, part of the body now. You don't remember the last time you fully followed a reading. You don't remember what your own voice sounds like. And you don't miss it. After prayers, you're sent to the garden, not to dig or weed or harvest, just to walk. You don't ask questions, you don't speak. You step into the overgrown path and let your sandals crunch frost underfoot. The air smells of dirt and memory. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you remember spring, when the garden was green, when the herbs had names. Now it's brittle and gray, but beautiful, in a kind of soft, desolate way. You crouch to brush frost from a rosemary bush. It crumbles. You nod. Lunch does not arrive because there is no lunch. You do not ask why. By mid-afternoon, you're directed to the refectory. The meal is simple, a watery broth, bread crust, ale. So thin it's nearly a suggestion, but your body responds to it like celebration. You sit at your usual place. You notice the table has been sanded recently. The wood is smoother. Someone cared enough to do that. The reader tonight doesn't. Read scripture, he recites names of monks who once sat here, long dead, long remembered, some of them buried beneath the cloister itself. One name catches your ear, not for its sound, but for its pause. A longer silence after. Maybe someone important, or maybe it's just how the brother read it. You finish your bowl, you leave it perfectly clean. After the meal, you are given a final task, oiling the wood in the refectory. A lowly job, a quiet one. Perfect. You take a rag. You take the oil, thick, dark, slow. You rub it into the bench, the table, the reader's stand. You work your way down the rows, silently acknowledging each knot, each scratch, each scar. You wonder who sat here. You wonder if they wondered about you. When you finish, the hall smells faintly of oil and dust and warmth. It glows in the candlelight. Like something holy, you return your tools to the cellar. The monk waiting there says nothing, just opens the door and closes it behind you. You're not sent anywhere next. You're simply left alone. The sky outside has turned silver, not night, not day. A kind of in-between. You walk the cloister. Slowly, you pass the statue of St. Cuthbert, still chipped. You pass the pigeon's roost. Empty today. The fountain is frozen. A sheet of ice with a single crack running from corner to center, like a map. You do not touch it. You just look. And then you return to your cell. You light your candle. You fold your robe beside your straw bed. You sit for a long time, staring at the wall, not in thought, but in stillness. And then you lie down, you breathe. You do not wait for the bell. Tonight you've traveled far, without going anywhere at all. You've sat through a dozen meals with nothing but silence and steam. You've tasted the same pottage through 100 textures. You've knelt in chapels, walked in cold cloisters, washed bowls and hands and histories. You've watched the flame of Gerald come and go, just like hunger, just like memory. You've stopped speaking, stopped questioning, learned to read the room with your bones. You've become a shadow among shadows, warmed only by ale and repetition. And yet, in all that quiet, something softened. You stopped needing the food to be good. You stopped waiting for comfort to arrive like a visitor. You learned to sit with discomfort like it was part of the furniture, because it was. You found the rhythm of ritual not as escape, but as anchor. You began to understand the meaning of eating in silence, of serving what little you had to someone colder than you. You came to see that emptiness is not always a void. It's sometimes just a room waiting to be filled with patience. Now, as the night deepens, your robe folded at your side, the candle flickering low, and your stomach still faintly hollow, you feel something unusual. Peace. No noise. No feast. No fanfare, but peace. And maybe that's what monks knew all along. So let yourself rest now. You're warm enough. You're tired enough. And you've learned how to be still. Let the day fall away. Let the silence hold you. Tomorrow there will be another bowl, Another prayer, another flicker of light in the dark, but for now, your story can rest. Because tonight, even hunger has fallen asleep.